This week on Quality Digest Live, what good can come from fuzzy thinking?
That's right. Plus, data gathering dilemmas. That and more when we come back.
There we go. Now you can hear me. Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for February 2nd, 2018. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Dirk Ducharme, Editor-in-Chief of Quality Digest.
That's right, coming through loud and clear. And I am Quality Digest publisher Mike Richmond. Well, Dirk, as you know, as all of you out there probably know, I'm not really a numbers guy.
No, really?
I graduated college with a degree in not math.
I am so amazed.
Anything but math. That's right, not me.
For liberal arts.
No STEM, no STEM here. I go right down to the root. But even I can appreciate the article, Millions, Billions, Trillions, How to Make Sense of Numbers in the News by mathematics professor Andrew Wang. And the piece appeared originally in the Conversation blog, which we like around here, and we republished it in the Quality Digest newsletter on Tuesday. Well, Wang's motivation in writing the article is to help people like me, many of us who are numbers averse, to better understand maybe the concepts, right, of numbers and understand how to really understand the true scale of figures that we regularly see in the media and the news. And many of these reports concern economic indicators, things like tax plans, criminal activities like money laundering or tax evasion on a massive scale. For the latter, Wang points out the revelations uncovered by first the Panama Papers and more recently the Paradise Papers. Have you heard of these?
I hadn't even. I've heard Panama Papers. I never heard of the Paradise
Papers. I hadn't either. Certainly, I'd kind of heard a little bit about the Panama Papers, but not the Paradise Papers. These are paraleaks, and one of them was in 2016, and the other was in 2017, that reveal records from offshore law firms that help corporations and wealthy individuals set up shell accounts in places like the Cayman Islands to hide inconceivable amounts of wealth, upwards of $20 trillion in value.
There's a lot of illions in there.
Yeah, that's a lot of illions. Up to $20 trillion in value. And that's gone untaxed in the world and is thus kind of stolen from the world economy. If you think about it, I mean, it's not taxed, so none of us get the benefit of tax dollars from that money, $20 trillion. Now, I just used the word inconceivable there, and that's exactly Wang's point. For many of us, a figure like $20 trillion is literally inconceivable, so much so that perhaps we can't really appreciate that sum's difference to, say, $20 billion or even $20 million.
Yeah, right? they all kind of, they all kind of sound the same.
They sound alike. That's the problem.
I mean, once you get into the illions, you've got lots.
Forget about it, right? It's like many, right?
Right, many, yeah.
Well, to help all of us better understand what a gargantuan sum, $20 trillion really is, Wang suggests changing our perspective a little bit. And to do so, he converts $1 million to 1 cent.
Okay, 1 million equals 1 cent.
1 million equals 1 cent to help us get some of the scale. So using such a ratio, the Panama Paradise Papers leak equals a more manageable $200,000.
Okay, we can all relate to $200,000 a home.
Sound of the price of a home, sure.
Okay.
$200,000. So keep that figure in mind. Now, recall that in 2008, insurance and financial services company AIG was bailed out by the U.S. government to the tune of at least $125 billion.
That's a lot of money.
A lot of money. So going back to Wang's $1 million equals 1 cent conversion ratio, the AIG bailout cost the U.S. taxpayers $1,250.
Okay, I see where he's going here.
Okay, you see where he's going, trying to get the scale a little bit.
All right.
Now, you may also recall that right around the same time as that bailout, AIG attempted to give its executives a tidy $165 million in bonuses, which we're all happy to report was mainly recovered. The ratio that Wang talks about then gives us an impressive $1.65. $1 million to 1 penny, 165 million bucks is $1.65.
So we went from $1.65 for that, $1,200 or something.
I'm going to get to it. It's right there on the teleprompter, Dirk. If you just wait, you can see it.
Just wait for it to scroll up. I can read it for you.
Patient, that's right. Okay, so to review, as Dirk began to do a little presumptuously there, the converted amount of AIG executive bonuses recovered was $1.65. The converted amount of the AIG bailout, funded by you and me, all of us, $1,250. The converted amount of money stolen and hidden from the global economy by money, tax laundering, and shelters, $200,000.
Okay.
Gives you the scale from $1.65 to $200,000. So you say 165 million bucks sounds like a lot. Compared to 20 trillion, it's nothing.
It's nothing.
It's dollars, pennies.
Yeah.
So yeah, trillions, billions, and millions are very different things. So next time you see dollar figures bandied around in various news reports, take that under consideration and try to better understand what those numbers really mean. Again, as you can see there, I mean, a dollar.
Yeah. So $1 million is a penny.
It's a penny, right?
$1 billion is $10.
Yep.
And $1 trillion is $10,000.
Yeah.
So when we're throwing these numbers around, particularly when it comes to budgets,
right,
and oh my God, we spent $10 million or something. Well, compared to $20 trillion, it's like, okay,
nothing.
Do the math, and then the comparison makes a lot more sense.
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah.
I mean, he has some other really good comparatives in there about how long it takes to earn that much money. One of them where if you made $2,000 an hour, every hour you lived, how long would it take you to equal $1 trillion? It's like 32,000 years.
Okay.
So it's crazy how those numbers work out. So check out that article from Andrew Wang. Good piece there.
Okay. Well, you know what the second most interesting technology to me is besides like 3D printing?
Right?
I love 3D printing. You know what the most other interesting thing is to me?
I don't know. Okay. You're going to tell me about it.
I am, though. It's right up there. Autonomous cars.
That's right.
We talk about autonomous cars a lot. And it's almost impossible to keep up with how quickly this technology and the push to get these vehicles on the street is advancing. I mean, it seems like it was just a year ago we were talking about autonomous cars. It was longer than that, but now it's like they're roaming the streets, they're already out there. Right now, for instance, General Motors is seeking approval from U.S. regulators for an autonomous vehicle with no steering wheel or pedals. So we're not talking just driverless. It has no controls at all. No. It's just a very open cabin space.
There it is.
There it is right there. GM asked the Department of Transportation to allow it to deploy the Cruise AV, which is based on the Chevy Bolt EV, to hit the streets without human intervention. And they want to do it by 2019. This is next year. So within 1 year, they want this car out on the streets. And the application would be for, let's say, ride-hailing services, which I guess would put them in competition with Uber and other such companies that are also trying to do the same thing. Sure. Except GM is going to get out there much sooner, it looks like, if this goes through. So GM isn't saying where these will deploy, but it already currently tests its driverless cars in San Francisco, downtown San Francisco, Phoenix, and Metro Detroit, with plans to expand to New York City this year. The application of the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration seeks to exempt GM from 16 federal standards that cannot be met with the driverless car. So some of the standards that are out there right now apply to driving vehicles or even vehicles with controls but driverless. So this is a slightly different thing. They had to get waivers for that. The company will also have to get waivers from various rules in each state where the cars are going to deployed. It will only operate in hands-free mode in pre-mapped urban areas, so you won't find it just kind of roaming the streets anywhere. By the way, you might ask, why does GM want to get into the driverless ride-hailing service? Yes, strangely enough. According to Reuters, at a November 30 briefing in San Francisco, GM's president, Dan Ammann, told investors that the lifetime revenue generation of one of its self-driving cars could eventually be several $100,000 per car. That compares to maybe $30,000 average that GM collects today for one of its vehicles. So there's that. That's why they want to be in the business themselves rather than selling the cars. It's like, let's do our own ride-hailing service because we're going to make several $100,000 per vehicle. So why not?
Well, think about how much money Uber makes, how profitable an organization Uber is, and take away the drivers.
Take away the drivers, yeah.
Think about how profitable that enterprise could be.
People are expensive.
I know. That's what I'm saying. I mean, think of all the stuff you have to get rid of. Now, have you ever been in a self-driving car?
No, I'd love to be in a self-driving car.
We'll have the chance at IMTS this year. They've had it at IMTS a couple of times. I think they had it in 2014 and 2016. They had the little self-driving buses that just roam around.
I thought about just going to San Francisco and see if I can snag one.
You can do that. How would you feel about it?
I think I'd love to do it.
How would you feel about getting picked up at the airport and then just you get into a car with no driver like that? You wouldn't be a little freaked
no,
out?
I think it'd be awesome.
I'd be a little freaked out. I don't know.
It'd be weird, and I'm sure I'd be like constantly looking around. But I would do it. I mean, if one pulled up, I'd throw my bags in there and hop in.
Yeah,
I mean, I'd have no problem at all.
No, I don't know. It would seem a little strange to me.
I'd be looking around a lot.
I don't know. Yeah, that's true. That's true. You'd be thinking fuzzy.
I would be, yeah, I'm really fuzzy.
That's a terrible segue.
Couple drinks on the plane.
That's right. All right, well, that was a bad segue. But in defense of fuzzy thinking is our next article by Harish Jose, and it appeared in our Thursday SIFT issue of the Quality Digest newsletter. Now, on first blush, you can see it right there. Harish Jose, one of my favorite authors. I love his stuff. He always does a really nice job of bringing it home for us. Now, on first blush, the term fuzzy thinking has a negative connotation. When somebody says that to you, maybe in an accusatory tone, you have fuzzy thinking, Dirk. It's natural to consider it to be synonymous with illogic, right? I mean, logic is clear, illogic is fuzzy. So, I mean, you know, there's this idea that you want to be clear, you want to be sharply focused on what you're saying, and everything is very precise. So that's a good thing as opposed to what I'm doing right now, talking around an issue. That's not so good, right?
Right.
Now, everything is not a go, no go gauge. I mean, right? Not every answer not every question has an answer that can be definitive yes or no. In many cases, the best and truest answer is the one that I think is Dirk's favorite. What's your favorite answer, Dirk? That's right.
Depends. That's also Davis Balistracci's favorite. It's like, depends.
But you say it, I think, every day in a meeting where somebody says to you, Dirk, can we do that?
Depends.
It depends. Maybe. I don't know.
Maybe not.
You're a great fuzzy thinker, Dirk. You're also a great non-fuzzy thinker. It's very, very rare. Now, there are a couple of ways that Jose represents this idea. First, he mentions this idea that many people have that everything is X or not X, yes or no, black or white. But that's a very reductionist way of considering truth that doesn't account for really the infinite gradients of reality that exist that are really between black and white. Right. I mean, as you move, and he has a good graphic in his article where as you move from pure white to pure black, at some point you're not white or black, you're gray.
You're gray,
and where are you in that at any one time?
Yeah.
Or consider this example, which maybe is a little clearer that Jose provides. In ancient Greece, about 2,400 years ago, there was a logician, and I hopefully won't butcher this fellow's name. None of his heirs will get on me. Eubulides of Miletus. He came up with the Saurides paradox. Saurides being derived from the Greek root soros, of course, which means heap.
Oh, of course.
Of course,
yeah,
it's the
soros.
Greek. That's right. Heap. So the paradox goes like this: if you have a heap of sand, and you take away a grain of sand from that, would that heap still be a heap? All right. What would happen if you keep taking grains away? At what point does it cease being a heap?
Right.
It's a good question.
It's a good question.
I mean, you think about it. It's like it's a heap of sand. Take a grain away. Take a grain away. Take a grain away. At some point, there's no more grains.
Right.
But when do you say that's not a heap anymore?
When's that point? Right.
When's that inflection point? You see, there's not necessarily a hard and fast rule about what is and what is not a heap. There's an extremely gradual transition here between something that is and something that isn't. And it's at least somewhat up to the person looking at that heap to make a subjective judgment about where you're at, what the truth of that really is. And all this applies to the work of continuous improvement, most pertinently, I think, through the thought process of the practitioner. I mean, if you think in terms of blacks and whites, it's either the right time to undertake an improvement initiative or it's not, right? I mean, it's black or it's white. Most likely, there's never going to be a perfect time to start an initiative like that. There's always going to be obstacles, constraints, doubts, resistance, whatever you want to call it, that's going to stop you from getting started on your improvement initiative. But don't be so clear about it. When you think in a fuzzy way, you see that the gradations of grays are really to your benefit. Now isn't necessarily perfect. Now is never going to be perfect. Right? But you should start anyway.
That's
the message. And this is a quote that I like a lot. It wasn't in Jose's article, but I use it all the time. The best time to plant an apple tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is right now. But you can't go back 20 years and plant the apple tree, so start doing it right now. I also think about something our friend Kelly Graves, who we've had on the show many times, talks about, and that's fixed mindsets versus growth mindsets. And I interpret a fixed mindset as being predisposed to say no. A growth mindset, on the other hand, predisposes you to say yes. And really, it's what kind of a frame you have in dealing with issues or problems or just your life. Do you look at things and say, well, that's the way I am. It's the way I am. It's the way I'm always going to be. I always have been. That's it. I can't do that, or I don't want to, or whatever. As opposed to a growth mindset where you say, well, yeah, I am that way. Maybe I've been that way. Maybe I will always be that way, but I don't have to be. You know, I can try something different. I can say yes to something, which will give me an opportunity to have a different experience, maybe a better experience. Now, it can be scary, I think, to say yes and plunge into something before you know all the answers. But, you know, if you wait until the stars align perfectly, you might miss your chance. And those stars may never align. And even if they do, you'll have lost precious time waiting for that moment. I mean, if you think of all the lessons that you could have learned if you jumped in and started today, you'll see that waiting doesn't really do you any good. I mean, even if you said, okay, a year from now I know is gonna be better than starting right now. Well, if you start now and you don't do it exactly right, you'll get some of it right, you'll learn a lot, and a year from now, when the stars are aligned better, you'll really be ready to take advantage of that opportunity. Right. So why wait is the message that he's saying here. It's really an important thing. And Joseph underlines this point towards the end of his article, and I want to kind of show you this quote. It's kind of a longer quote. I want to read it to you. And he says, lean is a journey and not a destination. We will never be 100% complete with our improvement. We are always incomplete with our improvement. And it's okay that we are incomplete. We have to keep on improving. We do not have to wait until we have the perfect idea or the expensive machinery or tool to start improving our processes. We do not have to wait for others to start on the improvement journey. In a Zen-like fashion, wherever we are, there we are. The right place to start improving. And he talks about that from the perspective of the kid who says, are we there yet? Right?
Yeah, right.
And he's like, yeah.
We're there.
We're here. You know, we're here. Here is where we are. And that's a really good lesson. I mean, this was a shorter piece, but it gets into some really complex issues if you think about it. The psychology of change and adapting to change and the desire to change, and not being so clear-cut about it. Because, I mean, what he's saying here is that logic isn't always your friend. Looking at things from a Boolean or reductionist perspective, a go, no-go, doesn't help you that much all the time. So his perspective is, if you think fuzzy, if you look at grays, you're going to get a lot more out of your opportunity to change and to improve in your organization and in yourself in your own life too.
Right. And it's interesting, what he has to say about fuzzy thinking and all or nothing thinking versus all or nothing thinking actually kind of ties into our next piece here, which is about data gathering. And we're talking about collecting personal data on the internet. Some people say it's, no, it shouldn't collect any data at all. And obviously companies that collect data say, no, it's awesome, let's collect it all. But the truth is there's good and bad to both. You have to look at them, and there is a lot of gray, and that's actually what her article is about. I mean, like it or not, we live in a digital world, and almost everything we do is touched by technology, and more that technology is connected to the internet, right? And that means that privacy has gotten to be a pretty tenuous concept. And I don't mean just by privacy the fear of being personally hacked, my personal bank account being hacked, or my bank being hacked, or your medical provider being hacked. I mean just the availability of your personal information and what you do on the internet through legitimate means, not hacking, but just the course of doing business during the day, browsing and so forth. You are leaving breadcrumbs behind that people can use and legitimately use right now. So some people worry a lot about this, some not so much, but we are all leaving digital breadcrumbs that are there for the picking. Which can be a good thing, by the way, we'll get to that in a bit, but maybe companies need to be a bit more cognizant of what the potential societal ramifications might be for gathering and use of personal data. So in her article, The 3 Dilemmas of Data Gathering, author Annette Aris suggests that if companies are to avoid a crisis of trust, that's the term she used, a crisis of trust with their customers over how they are using customer or visitor data, they need to think about these 3 ethical dilemmas. The first dilemma is buying data. And she doesn't mean companies buying marketing lists or email lists or demographic information and the like. She means literally paying customers to give them their personal data. Mike, I'm gonna give you money, or I'm gonna give you some service that you want if you give me all your personal data. Now, she gives a good example. We've all seen the commercials. Car insurance companies that offer discounts if people share their driving behavior or movement data, and they do that with a tracker. So in exchange for installing a tracker, these people will get potentially lower rates on their insurance. Now, if you think about this, makes a lot of sense. If the tracker shows that you don't drive much and you always drive the speed limit, then heck, you would think that you should get a lower rate than some crazy driving cross-country salesman, right?
Sure, of
it's
course.
like, sure, track my data, and if I'm doing well, charge me less. Sounds good. But Eris points out that this may mean that people on lower incomes are economically compelled to disclose their entire digital life in order to get a discount or free services. She says, digital privacy could become reserved for the rich because they would be the only ones who can afford, higher insurance premiums or a costly speeding ticket. So this is probably inadvertently targeting those who maybe can't afford insurance, so they're willing to give up personal data so they get cheap insurance. Right. Well, is that a good thing? That's the ethical question. Yeah. The second dilemma is one of what she calls solidarity. She means all of us on a level playing field where we all get treated the same. This has come to the fore several times over the past few years, talking about the availability of your electronic health records, your electronic health information amongst insurance providers and healthcare organizations. They share this data. Eris asks if people with a high hereditary risk profile would still be able to obtain life insurance or health insurance if that was the case, right? So maybe you're going to be winnowed out, not demographically. I mean, that already happens demographically. You're over 60, so your insurance rates go up. But no, individually. Oh, I can see. Oh, you've got a hereditary risk.
You got a marker.
I'm going to mark you, and now your rates are going to go up, or we're going to cancel you outright. This has been talked about a lot. So, if we have this completely transparent view of each individual's specific risks, could this have major implications for those amongst us who maybe are just less lucky? We're just born with the wrong genes, right?
Right.
The final dilemma, and this one's a bit stickier, I think. This is where there's a lot more gray, and that is influencing behavior. And I think this impacts everybody. Eris asked, to what extent is using data to actively influence people's behavior, advertising, acceptable? She uses the example of relevant advertisement. You'd probably all have experienced this. These are ads that pop up as a result of sites you have visited or searches you have done. It's called remarketing or re-advertising. And this is where you've searched for something, maybe, I'm interested in going to Iceland, and you're just doing all these searches on Iceland, and the next thing you see is advertising for, Iceland round trip, $250 bucks.
That's exactly what happened the first time I saw that. A couple of years ago. I was like, oh my gosh, that's crazy.
Right, they're looking over your shoulder, literally.
Literally,
they are doing it. So the idea behind this, obviously, is that greatly increases the likelihood that you're going to click the buy button on some ad. Now, this isn't necessarily bad, but can it go too far? Eris puts it this way: all these recommendations, advertisements, pushed under our noses are based on in-depth knowledge of our unconscious impulses or searches and so forth, and therefore seem to be increasingly deprive us of free will. Now, I think that is going a bit over the top. I don't think advertising deprives you of free will. It does influence you. So the question is, how much influence or how much information should advertisers have in order to target you more specifically and get to the sweet spot? It's a great question. At the end of the article, Eris, rightfully I think, points out that companies, like Quality Digest for instance, almost don't have a choice but to compete in this data gathering rat race and using that data to their benefits. It's not malicious, it's just business.
It's not personal, it's just business.
It's just business. Unfortunately, that's true. Companies got to compete, and data gathering has become one of the tools. So therefore, she suggests that this decision making to use or not use this data should not be left to companies alone. And she doesn't specifically say this, but she does allude to it, to government intervention. And she points to the EU's General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR, which is in place in Europe, whose purpose is to, and this is from their website, protect and empower all EU citizens' data privacy and to reshape the way organizations across the region, the EU region, approach data privacy. Now that's a regulation in Europe. It isn't so much here. It is a big issue, and I think companies should be thinking about these issues and at least being transparent with their customers. Now in the EU, that transparency is required. Matter of fact, one example of that, a lot of websites you'll go to, some of our advertisers in fact, if you go to their website, you'll get a little pop-up that says this website is collecting cookies and gives you the option of whether you want those cookies collected or not. But that's because that's an EU regulation.
It's a regulation,
Exactly.
And actually we're going to be talking about this more actually.
We're going to be talking about GDPR. We have a webinar.
We have a webinar coming up on this very topic, yeah, next week we'll get in a little bit more.
So
but
it's a big issue, and it is ethical. The last one is something everybody's facing, and this is something companies are facing all over the places. Okay, we advertise, and that's how we, and particularly media companies, that's the only way we make money practically. So how do you give advertisers the biggest bang for the buck? Well, that's by targeting users. Well, the more you target users, maybe the more invasive you're being. And where's the for Horatios, it's not black or white, it is somewhere in the middle, and where's that continuity heavy, where's that heap?
Where is it not a heap?
Where is it not a heap, right.
I mean, to me, I look at it this way, I mean, we're in a society, we're in a culture that is a very human-centric, bonded culture. And society, and people are influencing each other all the time. I mean, no one person is in a vacuum of not having influences by their friends, their family, their loved ones, whatever, or just advertising, or whatever. So I mean, it's happening anyway. I mean, there's what she's saying, what Annette's saying in this article is really a good point, that it can easily go too far and it can easily get invasive without us even knowing it. But you know, there are some benefits to it too. I mean, you know, as a consumer, having things served when you're looking in a place where you need it is valuable.
I mean, I've had those ads.
I've had remarketing ads where I'm like, that was really helpful.
That was helpful. It's like, I was looking, and it's only $250 round trip to Iceland. That's awesome.
That's right. Like I said, the first time it happened to me was from Expedia. Me going on Expedia, looking at a business trip to Atlanta or wherever the heck it was, and not buying the ticket, because I wanted to shop around a little bit more. And then the thing popped up like an hour later when I was in Yahoo, and I was like, yeah, well, and it was shocking to me because I'd never seen it before. This was like 4 or 5 years ago. It's like, that is weird. What a weird coincidence.
What a coincidence.
Yeah, I didn't know. So I clicked on it and I bought the ticket. But I mean, it was like, it was a good rate. And anyway, it's interesting. It was
mind control.
Yeah, it was scary.
They made you do that.
It was really scary the first time you see that when you've never seen it before. It's
and
really
people
weird.
have been freaked out by that, by the way.
Oh yeah, it's weird. But it can be effective. Like I say, in that case, I was like, yeah, I need that. It's obviously, I needed it based on my behaviors online, so I bought it, and they got a sale out of it. So it worked, and I was happy. I got a good rate, and it wasn't a bad rate. So it's interesting the way these things work. All right, we got a couple minutes, Eric. We could talk about this one for a while, but I want to get to our off script because I think you're going to enjoy this one.
All right.
Maybe. Okay. You know what today is?
February 2nd?
That's right. It's Groundhog Day.
Oh, it's Groundhog Day, right.
Groundhog Day.
Puxatawny Phil.
One of my favorite movies of all time.
Bill Murray. That is
Bill
an
Murray
awesome
in Groundhog's
movie.
Day,
That's an awesome
right?
movie. Yeah.
All right, so this is the question for you based
All
on
over
today being Groundhog's Day.
Okay.
What, in your opinion, are the quality debates that we've seen in the past that are going to keep coming up again and again and again and again and again in 2018 and in the future? And I've got one to give you an example.
Well, it depends.
For instance, the argument about whether or not risk has always been inherent in ISO 9001, right? Kind of an argument we see. There's both sides of it. We have one going on right now on our site on the VDA and the AIG,
and the
FMEA,
FMEA draft.
That's right. That whole thing. I mean, we have the arguments all the time that come up to whether to transform data or not. I mean, so what are some of the things that you see that maybe it's even annoying to you as an editor-in-chief of Quality Digest? These arguments that keep coming up and people keep on hammering on over and over again.
You know, I haven't seen many, although I think the one that will keep coming up just in general, it's not specific, but you will always see it, is every time a new standard comes along, so or let's say we're talking about the AIAG VDA draft manual for FMEA. Anytime something comes along that is different from the way it's being done. So we used to do, the automotive, makers used to use the 4th edition of the AIAG manual for FMEA. Now a different one's being proposed. And there's always resistance to change, and there's always this argument that goes on, and people are for it, people are against it. Anytime a new standard comes down the line, whether it's a government regulation or just maybe another standard that companies are going to have to get, ISO, name it, in order to get customers, there's always going to be, oh, this is a block to trade, this is preventing me from doing business, this is just a bunch of bureaucratic red tape. You're always going to get that because it involves change. It involves having to incorporate, whether you want to or not, and very often not, having to incorporate something that you don't want to incorporate because it's different from the way you've been doing things, and people are always going to resist that. So I think even in our field, there's always particularly regulations and standards that come down the line that people are going to rebel against, just because it's different.
How about the idea that no one's mind has ever changed? I always come up with this. It's like, well, we have our talking points, and we see it politically too all the time, obviously, where nobody's mind's ever changed. So, you bring these arguments and you churn them and you chew them over again and again and again, and it never seems like anything actually changes. Everybody has their entrenched positions, and they go back to their corners after they have the fight. But do you think there is a value of continuing to present these points for people?
Yeah, because I think people do change. Well, and in fact, look, the last presidential election was a good example. You had die-hard, blue-collar Democrats who voted for a Republican, Trump. Well, they changed their mind. Now, there were pressures for that, right? So there were economic pressures. They felt that, look, we've had eight years under a Democratic president. We didn't get what we wanted. Yes, we're Democrats, but my God, I'm still not making any money. I can't send my kids to college. I'm going to go Republican, right? Well, this happens in the business world as well, is sometimes there's other pressures that come along that will make you look at a standard differently or something differently because you have to, because what you're doing hasn't been working. So it's like, okay, this is the way I've been doing it, but I can see the shortcomings. Okay, I'm going to give this a try because who knows?
Or, right? Do you as a user change, or do the people that serve you the solution change to adapt to what they think you want? And you really don't change that much. You just get what you want because they've adapted their pitch to you.
I think there's a certain amount of compromise that goes on. And by the way, we're going to see that, I'm sure. So right now, we mentioned the AIAG VDA FMEA draft manual. That's open for comment right now, right?
For another month.
So I'm sure once they get all those comments in there, there's going to be changes to the draft, I'm assuming, maybe, that might accommodate those people who have legitimate concerns about some aspect of the draft document, right? So there is, I think, that's why it's important to participate in these standards always have a comment period. Right. It's always important to participate in those comments because you are actually affecting change in maybe the way a standard gets presented when it reaches its final version. But I think people also do change. Just last week we were talking about net neutrality. Yeah. I flip-flopped on that. I used to think, oh yeah, we need government intervention in net neutrality. Now I'm kind of going, well,
let the market decide.
Maybe not. And so I think if people are open, and you have to be willing to look at the other side, and I think that's the hard part. If you're willing to look at the other side, I think it is possible for people to change their minds. But it is more rare. I think everything ends up actually being more of a compromise. So.
Yeah. Good job, Dirk. Yeah, I think I agree with you. Absolutely.
Depends.
Well, happy Groundhog Day to all of you out there.
That's right.
I hope you.
Tony Phil did. So we're supposed to have 6 more weeks of
winter.
Yeah,
oh well.
That's right. Does that mean he went back in his hole or he didn't?
It means he saw his shadow and flew back in, and then he got scared. And I don't know what that really means.
Yeah, it makes no sense. You would think that if you could see his shadow, it means there's sunshine, which means we wouldn't have any more winter.
Yeah.
It seems backwards to me.
I don't know. Maybe I'm totally wrong on that. I just like the movie, so there you go.
Okay. That is it for today. So thanks to all of you for joining us at Quality Digest Live, and we will see you at the next Quality Digest Live, coming to you live next week.
On this Friday.
Exactly 1 week from now, minus half an hour. Okay.
All right, you guys have a good weekend. Bye.